Dude, that's impossible. You've won 5 times in a row. You have to be cheating, Josh said, tossing the cards onto the table with a sour look on his face. The cards just love me, I replied with a grin. So what now? One more round? I asked, finishing off my favorite American pale ale. It's 11. I should get going. Don't forget we've got exams tomorrow. Josh stood up, finishing his bottle too. Josh was a hard-working student and at the same time, my best friend. We met in college and we were complete opposites. He loved having everything in order, took studying seriously, and was obsessed with plaid shirts tucked into tight jeans. Me, on the other hand, I was all about taking it easy. Black t-shirt, black joggers, sunglasses, and barely passing exams. The only thing we really had in common was our love of board games, and that was exactly how our friendship started. One time, a professor paired the two of us up for a project. My tiny apartment on Pearl Street would have been way less comfortable for working on it, so we met at his parents' house in Shelburne. Josh had a really cool mom who offered me lemonade right away and asked if I wanted to stay for dinner. In his room, I noticed a shelf packed with all kinds of games, card games, board games, and stuff like that. I had half of them on my own shelf too, and some of them I'd never even heard of. We got into a conversation, opened one of the games, started playing around, and that was how it all began. Dude, the exams aren't going anywhere. Just a few more days and it'll all be over. I said that as I stood up, gathered the empty bottles, and tossed them in the trash. Suddenly, Josh straightened up like he'd been hit by electricity, and I flinched, startled by his sudden reaction. Right, listen. We got so into the game that I forgot to tell you. My Uncle Stephen has a cabin in the woods, 70 miles outside the city, with a pretty decent piece of land. You can grill there, have a bonfire, swim in the lake, and most importantly, play all kinds of card games and board games in peace. Maybe we could even invite some girls, he said excitedly. Come on, man, let's get away for a few days and unwind after this brutal exam marathon. I looked at him uncertainly. Uncle Stephen? You mean that cabin he rents out during the season? He agreed to let us stay there for free for a few days? That guy wouldn't give away sand in the desert for free. Josh stood there quietly for a moment, staring at the floor. Not for free. I sighed. Dude, we're broke college students. We'd barely have enough money for hot dogs, marshmallows, and alcohol. Maybe if we all chipped in, we could scrape together enough for gas just to get there, so there's no way we can pay Uncle Stephen for the cabin. It's not about money. I made a deal with him. We clean the cabin before the season starts. All right, I'm in. Sounds fair. 1 hour of cleaning and then the fun can start. Josh looked at me with an obviously forced smile and wide open eyes. He stood in the doorway and said as he closed the door behind him, "Yeah, man, exactly. It's a deal." I was standing outside the University of Vermont. That had been my last exam. Now it was finally time for some well-earned rest. I got back to my apartment, dropped onto the couch, and opened a bottle. A nice feeling of relief washed over me. Exams were over, and now I could focus on resting and doing absolutely nothing. Well, except having fun. Still, something was bothering me. The look on Josh's face when he left my place. He was clearly up to something, or at least hiding something. I knew him too well to miss that. The truth was, a cabin in the woods, a lake, grilling, and board games sounded way too good to start picking apart the details, especially since my mom had called a little earlier and told me that because I passed everything, my dad was sending me an extra $300 as a reward. My parents paid for my tuition, my studio apartment near campus, and all my bills. They also gave me money for food, and I usually had a little left over for random little things. But if I wanted anything more, I'd have to get a job, and I was in no hurry to do that. $300. I'm buying myself a new board game. That much was obvious. The only question was, which one? I sat down at my laptop and started looking. Then suddenly it hit me. In 2 days, we were heading to Josh's uncle's cabin, and Mia and her friend Chloe had agreed to come with us. Mia was my future wife. She just didn't know it yet. For now, we weren't even together. She was beautiful, feminine, liked my jokes, and most importantly, she liked board games. Josh, on the other hand, was crazy about Chloe. There was just one problem. Whenever he saw her, he couldn't talk to her like a normal person. During our whole time in college, he had maybe exchanged 2 words with her, and only because she had started the conversation a couple of times when she asked him about solutions to certain assignments. But this trip was a chance for both of us. A nice atmosphere, beer, a lake, and board games. In an environment like that, even Josh should be able to handle himself. This board game couldn't be just anything. It had to be something really good, something perfect for this exact occasion. A cabin in the woods, dark evenings without internet. It had to be horror, a creepy atmosphere, tension, and yeah, it had to be a game with tasks, so it wouldn't get boring. Girls were naturally pretty skittish, so this was my chance to show off my masculinity and courage. Maybe I'll even manage to set up a little cuddling. Who knows, I said, grinning at my laptop. The first 2 hours were a waste of time. On 99% of the sites, I kept seeing the same titles I'd known for years. Mysterium, Betrayal, At House on the Hill, Arkham Horror. They were good games. Some of them even great, but the only thing they might scare was a child. None of them matched the vision I had in mind. I wanted something that would make the girls instinctively move closer and grab an arm. I found a few forums, read dozens of posts, and compared reviews. Still, nothing hit exactly what I was looking for. The games were either too casual or too mechanically complicated, and besides that, most of them were horror in name only, while inside they were just another Eurogame with ghosts instead of workers. 4 hours later, around midnight, my eyes started closing on their own. I told myself I'd check a few more threads on Reddit, and if I still found nothing, I'd just pick something from my own collection. At worst, I'd talk to Josh tomorrow. He definitely had something good too. I was just about to close my laptop when I saw a fresh post from 1 minute earlier. Hexagon, the scariest card and board game in the world with physical tasks. I snorted under my breath. The name sounded interesting, but that line, the scariest game in the world, it reeked of cheap nonsense. A horror-themed card and task game with physical challenges. What kind of scary tasks could they possibly have come up with? Going into another room and turning off the light, I laughed to myself. Then I started reading. 6 decks of cards, 6 categories of tasks. The first person to reach the finish wins. The remaining players lose. The die has 6 colors. The game begins with the most fearful player. Turns move clockwise. The most fearful? That would definitely be Mia, I thought. Or at least I hope so, because I'd be sitting next to her. A player takes the die and rolls it. After landing on one of the 6 colors, they must draw the top card and complete the task. The decks should be sorted by color and shuffled. During the game, they must be kept face down so the players can't see the tasks ahead of time. I kept reading. The rules seem pretty simple. If you complete the task, you move forward. If you don't, you stay where you are. The game has its rules. Read them carefully before starting. After that, it will be too late. Failing tasks from the red and black decks has consequences. Estimated game time, from 3 hours to eternity. I finished reading the description and clicked the link. The site was ridiculously simple. A few product photos, a short description, and basically nothing else. Below that was an order form, a field for your address, phone number, email, and the price, $40. That was a lot for this kind of game, but I hadn't found anything else, so I decided to risk it. The site looked kind of too bare, like a typical scam, but luckily, to my surprise, there was a cash-on-delivery option. I clicked, entered my address, placed the order. The confirmation came immediately. Estimated delivery time, 2 business days. Damn it. We were leaving in 2 days. If there was any delay at all, the game wouldn't arrive on time. That would mean I'd wasted several good hours at my laptop for nothing. I scrolled all the way down the page, looking for the seller's contact information. Just perfect, I muttered to myself, annoyed. There was no company information or contact info, not on the site, and not in the order confirmation. I closed the laptop and lay down in bed. The next morning, the doorbell woke me up. Getting out of bed slowly, I glanced at the clock. 8 in the morning. Who the hell is banging on my door at this hour? I said sleepily. I walked to the door wearing nothing but my sleep shorts. How was that even possible? It was my order. I had placed it after 1 in the morning. I was stunned. A carefully wrapped package sat outside the door, wrapped in brown paper and tied with scarlet string. My address had been written on the paper by hand. No return address. As I stood there staring at it, I realized I had chosen cash on delivery. I shoved my shoes on and ran outside the building. I looked around, but there was no one there. Fine. If they don't want the money, then whatever. I'm not running all over the city looking for a courier, I thought. I went back inside and quickly unpacked the package. Dark, solid, smooth wood. It made a huge impression. I had never seen packaging this sturdy and elegant for any game before, and I owned around 150 of them. The only thing that surprised me was the lack of any manufacturer logo or the game's title on the box. I lifted the lid. 6 decks, each tied with ribbon in its own color. White, blue, green, yellow, red, and black. A die, solid and cube-shaped, with colored dots instead of numbers, and a neatly folded black game board with gray spaces. I unfolded it on the table and picked up the die. It felt noticeably lighter than it should have. The path ran in a circle, 60 spaces in total. In the center of the board was a block of text, printed in small letters inside a rectangle, outlined with a thin red border. Game rules. I started reading. 1. Once the game begins, it must be played to the end. Leaving the table, skipping a turn, or abandoning the game means eternal darkness. 2. Cheating is forbidden. Fraud results in immediate disqualification. 3. Physical violence against other players is forbidden. The consequence is immediate elimination. Physical violence? I get that some games stir up a lot of emotion and people get frustrated during a match, but that felt a little excessive. Then again, even regular Monopoly can tear apart the most loving family, so maybe it made sense after all. 4. Every task must be completed alone, unless the card says otherwise. 5. There is only one finish space. The game ends when the first player completes the circle. The remaining players end together with the game. I sat there in silence for a moment. The remaining players end together with the game. I shrugged. Atmospheric. Exactly what I'd been looking for. Somebody had clearly put a lot of work into creating the right mood. I folded the board back up, closed the box, and packed it into my backpack. We were leaving tomorrow. I couldn't wait to see Josh's face when he saw this beauty. I was tempted to show it to him that same day, but that would ruin the whole surprise. The next day, Josh picked me up at 10 in his worn-out Ford. Mia and Chloe were already sitting in the back seat. I tossed my backpack into the trunk and got into the car. "I heard you beat Josh 5 times in a row," Mia said as I got in. I should probably stay away from you when it comes to games like that. I smiled and said, or maybe you should sit even closer. Mia made an embarrassed face, and I felt heat flood my cheeks. In my head, that had sounded way better. Josh snorted from the driver's seat and started the engine. The drive was going smoothly. We joked around, laughed, talked about exams. We left Burlington heading south on Route 2, past Montpellier, then turned onto smaller roads. About an hour and 15 minutes in, things got a little more complicated. The GPS lost signal at the last intersection with a road sign, and Josh started driving from memory, mumbling something about how he'd been there a few times before and remembered the way. I hope your memory isn't failing you, Chloe muttered, staring out the window at the woods. I've been here 4 times, Josh said under his breath, blushing. I couldn't help it, and burst out laughing. Josh turned his head just a little in my direction, with a sulky look on his face. After a few wrong turns, one accidental drive onto somebody's property, and scraping the side of the Ford against bushes on a narrow side road, we finally made it there. Uncle Stephen's cabin stood in a clearing about 70 miles from Burlington, deep in the central Vermont woods. Solid, wooden, with a porch. The woods were maybe 30 yards away, and the lake, just like Josh had promised, really was less than 20 steps from the cabin. There were no people around, no other cabins, no houses, nobody. Beautiful place, I said, pulling out my backpack and Mia's suitcase. And completely cut off from the world, Mia said, looking around at the lake. Josh unlocked the door and we went inside. It smelled like old wood and dampness. Chloe started opening all the windows. The cabin looked like a typical rental place. Kitchen, living room, with a dining area and fireplace. 2 bedrooms and a bathroom with a shower. In the middle of the living room stood a large round table with 4 chairs. All right, Josh said, setting his bag down by the door. Before we start having fun, my uncle wanted us to clean up, I finished for him. All right, man, just tell us what needs to be done and let's get it over with. Josh made the exact same face he had made back at my apartment. Dude, what is it? How much is there? I asked, irritated. My uncle left a list in the kitchen, Josh said, staring at the floor. The list was hanging on the fridge, pinned under an anchor-shaped magnet, and it had 32 items on it. Wash the windows, vacuum and mop the floors, including the porch, clean the bathroom, mow and rake the yard, clean the kayaks. Mia looked at the list, then at me, then back at the list. You said 1 hour of cleaning, Mia said, and I had never seen her that pissed before. I took a step back, a little panicked. Josh said that. Dude, you said that, Josh replied, shrugging and still looking sadly at the floor. Then why didn't you correct me? I asked in a hopeless tone. Josh raised his eyes to me. Because I was scared you wouldn't agree, man. Because I wouldn't have, I snapped, pulling a beer out of the crate. So we got to work, doing everything on the list. Well, Josh and I did. The girls got offended, changed into swimsuits, and went to the lake. The only thing they cleaned was a little patch of ground to lay their towels on. 7 hours later, we were finally wrapping up. Josh was scrubbing the bathroom, and I was mopping the floors. On the way, I also hauled a pile of old newspapers from the 90s out of the basement. Exhausted, we sat down on the porch with cold beers. So, how's it going, boys? 1 hour of cleaning, huh? Chloe asked sarcastically. Josh looked even more miserable than before. That got on my nerves, and just as I was about to answer, Chloe added with a smile, "Just kidding. I'm starving. Are we eating or what?" Mia asked. We lit the grill, the sun slowly sank behind the trees, and it started getting darker. We ate hot dogs and corn, finished our first beers, and before it got completely dark, We went inside the cabin. It was getting cold, so Josh lit a fire in the fireplace. It gave the place a great atmosphere. The cabin filled with the crackling sound of burning wood, and warm orange light lit up the whole room, bringing a comfortable heat with it. We sat down at the table, and I pulled out the box. "What's that pretty little chest?" Chloe asked. "It's a horror game I ordered from some weird website. Indie creator, I think. The vibe looks promising. It's called Hexagon." We opened the box together. Mia grabbed the black deck and started untying the ribbon. I unfolded the board. Josh leaned over the rules, shuffling one of the decks while he read. He read in silence for a moment. "The remaining players end together with the game," he muttered. "Dramatic." "It just means the game ends when the first person reaches the finish," I said. "So, a classic race," Josh said with an expert look on his face. "Rule number 4, Mia read, with a theatrical hint of dread in her voice. "Every task must be completed alone." I'm already starting to get scared. "That's the whole point," I said, nodding. Josh picked up the die and rolled it between his fingers a few times, staring at the colored sides. We did a draw, and each of us got a piece. Dark wooden cylinders with no faces, different only by their bases. Mia had a pentagram, Chloe a trigram, Josh a tetragram, and I had a hexagram. We placed them on the starting space. "Who goes first?" Mia asked. "Maybe the oldest one," Chloe suggested. "The most fearful player starts," I said immediately. "And how exactly are we supposed to figure that out?" Josh asked, looking around at all of us. "I've got an idea. Maybe we go outside and take turns walking into the woods, and the one who lasts the shortest starts first," I asked excitedly. "That would definitely crank up the atmosphere, and just by itself it would already freak the girls out." Josh looked at me like I was an idiot. "That's a stupid idea. I'll just start." He grabbed the die and rolled it. Yellow. He reached for a card from the yellow deck and read it out loud. "Tell a scary story, beginning with the words, 'I swear this is true,' about the place you are in. End it with the words, 'and that is why I will stay here forever.'" All 4 of us laughed. Josh cleared his throat, straightened up dramatically, and began, "I swear this is true. This cabin stood here before there was a forest or a lake. No one remembers who built it. My uncle bought the land with the cabin included for practically nothing. We started playing this game, and that is why I will stay here forever." We applauded. "Dude, that cold tone was actually really good. I didn't know you had that kind of acting in you," I said enthusiastically, but Josh just sat there quietly, staring ahead. "Dude, you still with us?" "Yeah, sorry. I zoned out," Josh said, picking up his piece and moving it 1 space forward. Mia picked up the die and rolled. Blue. The card said, "Take a candle, go into the bathroom, or another dark room with a mirror, stand in front of it and say, 'Bloody Mary,' 3 times. After each time you say her name, wait 3 seconds. Come back and describe what you felt, assuming you survive, of course." "Classic," Mia said in an uncertain tone. She took the candle from the table and went into the bathroom. She closed the door behind her. For a moment, there was silence. Then we heard her voice, slightly muffled by the door. She said, "Bloody Mary," 3 times, loud and clear, almost like she wanted us to hear every word. A moment later, she came back with a faint look of fear on her face. "Nothing showed up," she said, "but those 3 seconds between each time, when you're staring into the mirror, they're actually really creepy." She moved her piece forward. My turn. I rolled the die and got read. "Recite from memory the first and last names of 3 people who died in your hometown. Warning, if you fail to do so, those 3 people will become your loved ones. Be honest. The game knows when you lie." I read the task twice. The atmosphere is great and all, but somebody really went overboard with this one, I said, scratching my head. The game knows when you lie, Chloe repeated. Whoever made this has a sense of humor, she added quietly. To be completely honest, I don't know the first and last names of 3 people who died in my hometown. Let's move on. Chloe's turn. White deck. Ask the group a secret question you do not want to answer yourself. We kept playing through the next rounds, sitting by the fire, slowly drinking beer. The game really was good, and the tasks, even when they were a little too dark at times, built an amazing horror atmosphere. All of us sat there on edge before each new task. There were scary stories and little creepy challenges, sometimes deep questions or confessions that forced someone into a moment of real reflection. Somewhere between the 3rd and 4th round, I felt something brush against my leg. It was Mia. While adjusting her chair, she had slid it closer to mine, and now our knees were touching. That meant the plan was working. The pieces moved unevenly. Josh and Mia were the closest to the finish. I was second, and Chloe was last. And then Josh rolled red. He reached for the red deck and drew a card. He read it silently for a long moment. You playing? Mia asked. I snatched the card out of his hand and started reading, while Mia leaned closer to me and read along. Go outside. Move 10 feet away from the cabin. Then stand perfectly still for 3 minutes. Close your eyes and do not make a sound. Do not turn around, no matter what you hear or feel. If you scream, run, or move before the 3 minutes are up, you will never return to the cabin again. Silence. It's just a game. What freaked you out so much? I asked. The game? How did it know we're playing in a cabin? Josh replied. Dude, probably just some kind of thematic touch or something. But even as I said it, I felt an icy pressure in my stomach. I hadn't paid attention to the word cabin before. The game could have been played in a regular house, an apartment, or even a hotel room. So why cabin? Chloe let out a little laugh. What, Josh? Already losing your nerve? Josh stood up, shot me a hard look, grabbed his jacket from the hanger, and walked out onto the porch. He closed the door behind him. We watched through the window. Josh stood on the porch step, shoved his hands into his pockets, and walked toward the woods. He stopped 10 measured steps from the cabin, started a timer on his phone, and went completely still. This game is actually intense, Mia said quietly, starting a timer on her phone, almost at the same time Josh had. Yeah, I nodded, unable to forget that our knees were still touching. The first minute passed. Josh stood motionless, just like we expected. Nothing unusual happened. Those warnings were just there to scare us and make the whole thing hit harder. 30 seconds into the second minute, I noticed movement at the edge of the woods. Something in the darkness moved incredibly fast between the trees, then ran right in front of Josh. Mia grabbed my wrist hard under the table, and I froze. I wanted to shout at my friend to come back inside, but I couldn't. My throat tightened. I couldn't even swallow, so the only sound that managed to come out was a weak little squeak followed by a cough. The third minute ended, and Josh walked back into the cabin as if nothing had happened, closed the door, sat down, and reached for a beer. 3 minutes, he said, and I'm freezing like I'd been out there forever. Did you hear anything? Chloe asked, staring at him in fear. For a moment he didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the bottle in his hand. The woods, the sound of branches, nothing else, he finally said. I felt stupid for panicking so badly, but luckily the girls didn't seem to notice. See? I told you, it's just a game, I said, in a voice that sounded a little too confident, as I leaned back and folded my arms behind my head. I kept wondering what that shadow had been. Had we imagined it? Or maybe it really was just some animal. Josh's piece moved one space forward. The next rounds kept thickening the atmosphere around the table. You could feel the fear and tension in the air, and the tasks were getting stranger and stranger. Chloe rolled the die and got black. It was the first card from that deck, and none of us had any idea what to expect from it. She read the card silently first, then out loud. With your left hand, hold your game piece. Put the drawn task card in your mouth. Then lie perfectly in the center of the living room and listen for 3 minutes and 33 seconds. Write down every sound you hear. Do not leave out a single one, or you will be disqualified. Note: the other players are allowed to interfere by making sounds. Chloe lay down on the floor and closed her eyes, while the rest of us sat perfectly still, trying not to make a single sound. The game allowed interference, but we wanted to have fun and not ruin the atmosphere, so none of us did anything. After 3 minutes and 33 seconds, when the timer went off, she got up and immediately started writing, still holding the card in her mouth and the piece in her hand. When she finished, she placed the paper on the table and pulled the card out of her mouth. I know the rules said you could interfere, but that was a little too much. If you were trying to scare me, it didn't work. She was clearly angry. I picked up the paper and read it out loud. Floorboard creak, fire in the fireplace, wind outside the window, knocking on the door, the sound of the door opening, and footsteps. The three of us looked at each other, unease written all over our faces. Chloe, we didn't move at all. Are you messing with us? If you are, stop. This is already scary enough, Mia said. Chloe looked at her in confusion. Me? You're the ones messing with me right now, and you need to stop immediately. This is pathetic. If that was acting, then she deserved an Oscar. Chloe genuinely looked offended. Whatever, Mia muttered. Josh grabbed the die and rolled again. Another black card. He stared at it for a long moment, then threw it to me without saying a word. I looked at him, confused, took it, and started reading out loud. Go to the bedroom with the north-facing window. Stand in front of the window, facing the glass. Stare at the glass for exactly 72 seconds. If the face of a man appears in the window, you must not break eye contact. If you do, he will take your body, and you will spend eternity in his place. I felt a bead of sweat run down my temple. I handed him the card back. Josh stared at it for a moment, then looked up at me. There was something in his expression I had never seen before. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was pure fury. How does the card know, he said slowly, trying badly to stay calm, that the bedroom has a north-facing window? I have no idea, man, I replied, and a strange jolt ran through my whole body. You found the rental listing for the cabin, didn't you? Josh asked, his voice rising. I slowly leaned back in my chair. Dude, what the hell are you talking about? You set us up. Admit it. You think this is funny? He said, fury boiling in his voice. Dude, I cut in. Seriously? How the hell would I even do that? Josh planted his elbows on the table. I had never seen him like this. Usually he was calm, steady, sometimes irritated, sure, but I had never seen him this angry. Now there was pure hatred and aggression coming off him. There are too many coincidences, he said, practically foaming at the mouth. The game knows we're in a cabin. It knows there's a bedroom with a north-facing window. Next thing you know, it'll know our names. You brought it. I've never seen a game package like this, and I own hundreds of them. Some of them are limited editions that cost a fortune. None of them were packed this well, and on top of that, there's not even a title or company name on the box. I could feel myself getting hot. I didn't know what the cabin looked like, which way the windows faced, or how many bedrooms there were. I found this game on Reddit, clicked the link in the post, and just ordered it. If I wanted to scare you guys, do you seriously think I'd spend hundreds of dollars making a custom game? And besides that, I wouldn't even have had time to do something like that after finding out about the trip. If I wanted to scare you, I'd make up some ghost story, not build an entire game. I said it while breathing hard, feeling my face go red. Josh was my best friend, but in that moment, I wanted to hit him. Josh straightened up. Then show us the site and the order confirmation. Gladly. I said it as I grabbed my phone. I opened my email and started looking for the order confirmation. It wasn't there. It should have been right at the top, but it was gone. Dude, it's not here. It was there the day before yesterday. Something must have deleted it, I said, searching through spam, trash, and the rest of the inbox. Then show us that mysterious post or the site, he said, taking a sip of beer. That should have been easy. My phone had browsing history synced with my laptop. I pulled up the history and went back to the day before yesterday. There were around 500 links from all kinds of board game sites and forums, but there was no sign of the post or that weird website. I went straight to Reddit. The post was gone too. I stared at the phone in disbelief. Josh, seriously man, I swear to you I ordered that game. I'm not screwing with you. I just can't find the links. Josh, Chloe said quietly, please stop. I'm scared. Josh kept staring at me for a moment longer. Then he shifted his eyes to Chloe, shrugged, and stood up. You could at least admit it. I'm going into that bedroom. He went. The three of us sat there with Mia and Chloe. No one said anything. We were all frozen in shock over what had just happened. Chloe stared at the board. Mia stared at me. You didn't do this, right? She asked quietly. Of course I didn't. If I'd made something like this, I would have bragged about it after the first round, I said. Time passed, and Josh came back to the table on shaky legs. He was pale. He grabbed a bottle and chugged 3/4 of it in one go, then opened another. None of us said a word. We all stared at him in disbelief. Everything okay? I asked carefully. There was a face, he said quietly, staring into the bottle. In the reflection of the window, I saw the face of a man with an unnaturally wide smile and bulging eyes. He was saying something to me, but I couldn't hear what. I wanted to run, but the card said clearly that I wasn't allowed to look away, so I kept staring at him. I'm scared. Something is seriously wrong here. Josh picked up his piece and moved it forward one space without even looking at the board. Some kind of revenge prank. I'm telling you, I didn't set you guys up with this game, I said angrily, but his reaction seemed genuine. Josh had never drunk beer like that before. He always drank slowly, calmly, with control. By the time I finished 3 beers, he'd barely be done with his first. But a man's face in the glass? That was impossible. This was just a normal game. We'd already completed more than a dozen tasks, and nothing strange had actually happened. Then my phone rang. All of us jumped, and I almost dropped it. The screen said, Mom. It was after 1 a.m. My mom had never called me at that hour. Something had happened. I answered. Hey Mom, is everything all right? Sweetheart. Her voice sounded different, sad. I could hear that she'd been crying. Grandma, about an hour ago, we got a call from the hospital saying she passed away. We're going to pick up her things. Please come home tomorrow. My stomach tightened so hard that for a moment, nothing got through to me except that one word, passed. Grandma was 65 years old. The last time I talked to her was at Christmas. What happened? I asked, feeling tears welling up in my eyes. My mom answered in a breaking voice. She felt faint and fell down the stairs. They tried to save her at the hospital, but they couldn't. Please come home tomorrow. We need to start planning the funeral. Okay. I hung up. I sat there holding my phone. What happened? Mia asked. Grandma, I said, trying not to break down. For a moment, I completely forgot about the game, the argument, and everything Josh had said just before. Then I remembered the card. Recite from memory the first and last names of 3 people who died in your hometown. If you fail to do so, those 3 people will become your loved ones. I said it out loud, and all 3 of them looked at me in horror. Chloe stood up from the table. I've had enough. I'm packing my stuff and getting the hell out of here. The moment she finished speaking, she dropped to the floor, completely still. Josh dropped to his knees beside her and turned her onto her back. He tried to wake her up, spoke to her, patted her face. Mia screamed and started crying. I was still barely aware of what was happening, but I tried calling emergency services. None of the numbers worked. My phone suddenly lost all signal. She just stood up, Josh said in a numb voice. She stood up and said she was going to pack. Why did she suddenly collapse? Why can't I wake her up? Rule 1. Once the game begins, it must be played to the end. Leaving the table, skipping a turn, or abandoning the game means eternal darkness. I read out loud in a hoarse voice. That's impossible. It's just a game. You said so yourself, Josh said, looking in my direction. I put a hand on his shoulder. Please, sit down. We don't know what might happen. He shoved my hand away. Jesus Christ, man. Chloe is dead. Does that even register with you? Oh, believe me, it does. This fucked up game took my grandma and now it's playing with us. It pretended to be a normal board game, and now it's taking us apart piece by piece, revealing more and more and giving us worse and worse tasks. And now we can't even stop, I said, tears in my eyes. Mia sobbed and said, Rule 5. There's only one finish space. The game ends when the first player completes the circle. The remaining players end together with the game. What does that mean? Josh, who had already been pale, now looked white as chalk. He stood up from Chloe's body and sat at the table, staring at me with huge, terrified eyes. As he spoke, it means only one of us gets out of this alive. Only the first person to reach the finish wins. The rest lose and end up like Chloe. No physical violence against other players, Mia continued. They knew that once people figured out what was happening, that would be the first thing they'd think of. You don't know that. It says they end together with the game. We don't know exactly what that means, I said, raising my voice. At that moment, all 3 of us doubled over in our chairs, with expressions of unbearable pain. A brutal spasm shot through my chest. It felt like some immense weight was crushing me from the inside. I couldn't breathe. I started panicking, but I couldn't move. I felt myself slipping away. Then suddenly, the pain stopped completely. What the hell was that? I gasped, standing up and fighting for air. Mia started shaking and making strange, high-pitched sounds. It wasn't normal crying. It was pure panic. We're going to die here, she stammered. The pieces on the board trembled, and another stab of pain shot through me. This one was shorter, maybe only a second, but it was enough to make me drop to one knee. Josh said nothing. He stared at the board, and all that was left on his face was fear and hopelessness. Grabbing the table, I said, "The game wants us to keep playing. If we don't start again, that'll happen again, or something worse." I looked at Josh. "Your turn." Josh raised his eyes to me. "Play? What's the point? We're done. Probably only one of us gets out of here, and even that's not guaranteed." Deep down, I knew he was right. As much as I didn't want to admit it, there was no other way to read that rule. Josh, we keep playing, and in the meantime, we try to figure something out. We have to try. He picked up the die and rolled it. Black. Damn it. Why were only black and red coming up now? This made no sense. Josh put his hands over his face, wiping away sweat and tears. With a trembling hand, he reached for the card and read, "Go outside. Find something that does not belong in this place. Bring it back and place it on the table. You have 1 minute to complete the task. If you return empty-handed, your hands will vanish forever." We looked at each other, and then Josh ran outside, turning on his phone flashlight. We waited. Mia kept wiping her eyes and sniffling. Time crawled by, mercilessly. As soon as Josh left, we started a timer. 30 seconds had already passed. I stared out the window, trying to spot him. There was no sign of him anywhere. I hoped he hadn't run. After what he'd seen, he wouldn't do that. Josh wasn't stupid, but fear like this could mess with anyone's head. 49 seconds. Please let him make it. 55, 56, 57. Mia closed her eyes and covered her ears. I didn't blame her. I didn't want to watch either. Please, man. 58. Josh burst inside with a slam and lunged toward the table, dropping something that looked like a small rag doll onto it. "I made it," he said, out of breath. For a moment, no one said anything else. It was like we were waiting for confirmation from the game, like we needed to know for sure. 30 seconds passed. We were safe. "Dude, what is this?" I asked, picking up the ugly little rag doll. "A doll," Josh answered. I looked at it more closely. It was cloth, about the size of a hand, sewn from gray fabric. It wore something that might once have been a dress, but now it was nothing but faded, filthy scraps. Where a face should have been, there was only smooth, scorched cloth. "Where did you find it?" Mia asked, horrified. "By the back door," Josh said, still breathing hard. "On the forest side. It was lying right by the threshold. That doll was unbelievably hideous and disturbing. It looked like a toy from the 70s, both in the way it had been made and in how old and ruined it looked." Mia picked up the die and rolled. Red. She didn't want to read the card herself. She handed it to me. "Go into the room alone, sit in the middle, close your eyes, and stay perfectly still for 5 minutes. When you return, tell the remaining players what you heard. Do not turn on the light. Do not open your eyes. Do not answer them. Do not leave before the time is up. If you break any of these rules, they will stay with you forever." Mia stood up and covered her mouth with both hands. "Who are they?" she asked, and tears started running down her face again. "Listen, Mia, you have to do it. If you follow every instruction exactly, nothing will happen to you. Just like with Josh and the face in the window, remember?" She nodded, wiping her eyes. She went into the room and shut the door behind her. We waited on edge, in silence. None of us had the strength or the desire to talk. I was scared for Mia. 3 minutes passed, 2 more to go. After 5 minutes, the timer buzzed and the bedroom door opened. Mia stood in the doorway, looking at me. She was pale, and her eyes were bloodshot and red. She stood perfectly still, staring at me. Then she slowly started walking toward the table, without taking her eyes off me. I felt fear rising inside me. "Mia?" I asked, horrified. She looked like she wasn't herself. Why was she staring at me like that? She started speaking. I heard voices, different voices, terrifying voices, full of pain, fear, and anger. I heard a woman weeping, repeating that this was only supposed to be a game. I heard a man screaming that he was suffering. I heard... She stopped and completely fell apart. I heard Chloe. She was saying she was scared. She was saying it was my fault. She said I was the one who talked her into coming. They were right next to me. They were circling around me, and she went silent there, looking at me with even more fear and sorrow in her eyes. The silence lasted a couple of minutes. I didn't push her. I could see that whatever she'd heard wouldn't come out. Suddenly, she jerked and grabbed at her heart. The game was forcing her to finish the task. Josh covered his eyes, but tears were still slipping through his fingers. I didn't want to know. I was terrified of what she might say, but I asked anyway. I knew we had to hear it. What else did you hear? Mia, you have to say it. Mia opened her mouth, and a wave of unbearable dread hit me. My heart was pounding like crazy. She looked at me with empty eyes, and the last tear slid down her cheek. I heard your grandma. She was cursing you. She said it was your fault. She said she hated you, and that you would suffer forever, just like she does. The pressure in my stomach bent me in half. I couldn't answer. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't breathe. My hands were tingling, and I could feel them curling inward. Your turn. You have to roll, Josh said without taking his hands away from his face. I fought with myself for a moment, then grabbed the die. I rolled. Red. I just wanted it over with. I grabbed the card and read it out loud. Go outside and step into the lake. You must submerge your entire body, including your head, and stay underwater for 45 seconds. Once submerged, you are not allowed to move from where you are. You may not close your eyes. Failing to complete the task will result in you staying there forever. I stood up and walked out of the cabin. I didn't put on shoes or a jacket because there was no point. I didn't even bother taking off what I was wearing because by then I didn't care anymore. I walked to the lake and dipped one foot into the water. It was so cold it felt like it was piercing straight through me. Outside, everything was quiet and calm. I lowered my other foot in, staring out across the lake. The reflection of the moon spread over the surface. The sight was hypnotic, and for a fraction of a second, it let me forget all the fucked up shit that was happening. I walked slowly deeper into the lake, feeling the water burn me with cold, even through my clothes. When it reached my neck, I took a deep breath and went all the way under. Time started, and I began counting in my head. My eyes were wide open, and I tried not to blink, even though the water stung with cold. Only about 10 seconds had passed. The cold made my whole body shake, and I was already starting to run out of air. Then suddenly, 4 large shapes crashed into the water about 6 feet in front of me. It was as if someone had hurled 4 boulders in with full force. When the bubbles cleared and the water settled, I froze. It was my mother, my sister, Josh, and Mia. Their faces were full of shock and terror. The bottom was dragging them down. They couldn't surface. They were staring in my direction, thrashing, and I could see panic and desperation in their eyes. I wanted to swim to them, to save them, but I knew I couldn't move. I knew I couldn't do anything. All I could do was stand there and watch. I'm not going to describe exactly what I saw next. Something inside me broke. A monstrous pain tore through me, not physical pain. It was the kind of pain I can't even explain in words. It felt like my heart had shattered into millions of pieces. 30 seconds passed. My head was spinning. I don't know if it was from the lack of oxygen or from the scene unfolding in front of me. All 4 of them were trying to scream something at me, but only streams of bubbles poured out of their mouths. I prayed it was just an illusion, that it wasn't real. I wanted to close my eyes. I would rather have gone blind than keep looking at what I was seeing. Slowly, the world in front of me began to fade, and I felt strangely weightless. I kept staring ahead as everything around me blurred and sharpened in turns. Then I realized there was no one there anymore. The time must have been up. I shot out of the water, gasping for air and choking. I stumbled out of the lake and threw myself onto the cold, wet sand. Then I started crawling toward the cabin. I didn't want to be there. I wanted to run as far from that place as possible. I wanted to feel the warmth of the fireplace and see my friends. I needed to know they were okay. I reached the cabin, grabbed the cold metal doorknob and stopped. What if it hadn't been an illusion? What if I opened the door and no one was there? Or worse, what if they were? But I closed my eyes and opened the door. Mia and Josh were sitting in their places, pale, exhausted, and terrified, but alive. So my mother and sister were still alive too. I stepped inside. My clothes were heavy, and water was pouring off them onto the wooden floor of Uncle Stephen's cabin. I didn't give a damn. I opened a beer and sat down at the table, taking 2 big gulps. Josh and Mia didn't say a word. They had probably guessed I hadn't just been through a bad moment. I had gone through the same kind of horror. Each of them had. I moved my piece forward on the board. All 3 of us were getting close to the finish. Josh and Mia were 20 spaces away from winning. I was 21 away. "Josh, your turn," I said, finishing my beer. For a moment he sat completely still, staring at the die as if it might burn him. But then he picked it up and rolled. It landed with red facing up. He drew a card from the deck and started reading. "Do not leave the table. The remaining players must sit with their backs turned to you. They may not speak to you or turn around. The first dead person you just thought of will appear behind you. You must not speak to them or look at them. You may only sit and listen. The challenge lasts 666 seconds. If you fail to complete the task, that person will gain eternal peace, and you will be condemned to eternal suffering." Josh finished reading. There was a strange calm on his face, maybe even indifference. "Turn around," he said coldly. So we did. I could hear Mia crying behind me. I wasn't even capable of that kind of emotion anymore. The only things I felt were fear and pain. I still couldn't stop thinking about what had happened to me in the lake. I had no idea what to expect. Who had Josh thought of? Then we heard a man's voice. He sounded maybe 35 years old. "Hello, son." Josh's father? I had never asked him about his dad. Whenever we were at his place or he talked about home, he always mentioned his mom, never his father. What kind of friend was I if I had never even asked? The man spoke again. "We haven't seen each other in years. Won't you say hello? I've missed you all so much, you and your mom. I love you both very much." Then I heard sobbing behind me, followed by words I would never forget. "I love you too, Daddy." Right after that, the room was torn apart by a horrifying scream. I spun around instantly. Josh was gone. All that was left was an empty chair and his piece on the board. Mia turned around a moment later, staring blankly at the place where Josh had been sitting. "It's just the 2 of us now," she said, without even a trace of emotion in her voice. I had the feeling that something inside her had broken too, and that even if we survived, neither of us would ever be the same again. We kept playing. Mostly red and black cards kept coming up, though sometimes we got blue or white ones. We completed every task, no matter the cost. The whole time, I had one thought in my head: her or me. Mia was still in the lead. This was probably the end for me. It was funny. I had spent our whole time in college crazy about her. I thought I would have done anything for her. It was getting close to 4 a.m. Mia was 1 space from the finish. I was 2 away. My turn. Green. I had just realized that color had never come up before. I picked up the card, and it paralyzed me. I sat there for a long moment, staring at it. Then I stood up and looked at Mia. A tear slid down my cheek. I said out loud, Yes, I want to live. Mia looked at me with confusion all over her face. What are you doing? What's the task? I handed her the card. I couldn't say it out loud myself. I looked straight into her eyes and waited. She took the card from me and read it out loud. Stand up and say out loud, "Yes, I want to live." If you complete the task, you move forward 2 spaces on the board. She finished reading and looked at me. In her eyes, I saw disbelief and something that might have been disappointment. In that same instant, her head dropped onto the table, but her eyes remained fixed on me, cold and empty. Suddenly, my phone buzzed, an email notification. I unlocked it and read the message. "Congratulations, you won the game." When I looked up, the board was gone. I sat back down in the chair and stared ahead with empty eyes. I had no strength left to think, to wonder, to make sense of what had happened. The minutes just passed, and I sat there. At 4:37, the phone rang. Unknown number. I answered and lifted it to my ear without emotion. "This is Officer DeLuca with the Burlington Police Department. I'm very sorry for the hour. Are you the son of Susan and Robert?" "Yes," I said flatly. "There was a serious traffic accident tonight. Your mother and sister." I ended the call. Right, the red card from the beginning of the game.